I didn't even notice you have a two-tone suit going on.
Can
You're
I tell
a wild
you about this
man.
suit? Harsh graphic images of you and Brett Weinstein and Ben Shapiro and Russell Brand and, you know, as an assortment of the
That whole
Sam
intellectual
Harris
dark web
too.
thing.
That's
Sam's
the guys,
in there.
man. Sam's in there too. Yeah.
I still have hope for Sam Harris.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Yeah, I hope he makes a comeback. So.
I mean, he's not really going away. He's just got some weird opinions.
Yeah, well,
But
there's plenty of that floating around.
Well, I think when you have like complex, fascinating brains, they go off in all kinds of different directions. Don't you think?
This is one of the dangers of being creative, right? Most creative ideas are wrong, and a good section of those wrong ones are fatal. But now and then you get one that's necessary. So.
Yeah, we were talking about the Twitter files before we got rolling and what the new stuff is. So the new stuff has something to do with AI and some sort of content moderation?
Oh, yeah. Well, Tabby released some Twitter files today on Twitter, obviously, and they're going through the code. Now, I don't understand the technical details, but, you don't exactly know when you see the output of a code-generated system, exactly what rules it's using to sort the information. I suppose that's the equivalent of shadow banning. And there was apparently all sorts of directives built into the code to amplify certain kinds of messages and, de-amplify others. And
just a brief commentary before YouTube takes this down. I started posting about ivermectin, and that eventually led into the vaccines, and now excess deaths. My voice is being downranked, or that I am being shadow banned, is a First Amendment violation. We'll see if this one stays up or if it ends up getting taken down. I'd like to get these videos out and shared.
So apparently Musk is doing what he can to clean that up. Ruben reported that the other day. Yeah. And then Tybee today, he was talking more about the whole Russian collusion fabrication.
Yeah.
So that's also real fun.
Well, how about the one guy that was going after Trump, who it turned out was actually in collusion with the Russians?
Oh, yeah, that's a rough one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the best defense is a good offense, and so.
I guess. Yeah, I guess.
I know.
But
we're in a
it's
crazy
just like,
world.
why would anybody not think that was going to come around to get them?
It's amazing how often people don't think that, what they're doing isn't gonna end up aimed squarely at them.
Well, this Twitter thing, right? Like, they never suspected that someone like Elon was going to come along and buy Twitter and then, in an unheard of tactic, have a bunch of journalists review everything in all of their Slack meetings and all their emails, look under the code, look under the wiring under the machine and find out how it was actually running. And why? I mean, the fact that anyone would ever think that any of this stuff is a good idea, that people don't understand, like, the dangers of censorship. They don't understand where this leads to.
I've made this claim on Twitter that there's something cowardly about anonymous posting, and I'm not going to retract that because I believe that in 99% of the cases that's true. Now, people say, well, if you're a whistleblower, you have to be anonymous, and what about people in totalitarian states or in a company? Well, that's the whistleblowing problem. I think, 1% of anonymous posters are heroes, but 80% of them are Machiavellians. And so...
Well, but there's also the factor of people that don't want to get in trouble at work.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's kind of the whistleblower problem.
But not even whistleblowers. I mean, people that just have opinions that
You mean that might get them in trouble with the College of Psychologists in Ontario, for example?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. And so, I think one of the ways of handling that technically, what I'd like to see happen at Twitter, for example, not that I'm in a position to know because I know it's complicated, is I think the anonymous types should be separated from the real people. Let's say you want to be a whistleblower, you want to say something that's going to get you in trouble at work. So you want to do it anonymously. It's like, maybe you're shirking your responsibility. Because maybe you have a responsibility, and I could be persuaded alternatively, but maybe you have a responsibility if you have something to say it in your own voice and to put yourself behind it. And maybe you're taking the easy way out by not doing that. And, I don't want to say that about every single person who posts anonymously, but, tyranny emerges when normal, honest people are now afraid to say what they think. And when the tyranny is complete, in a totalitarian state, no one ever says what they think about anything. Everyone lies all the time. And I see part of the pathway to that, the unwillingness of ordinary people to take the consequences of their truthful speech. You know, and I also think that's detrimental to them, because I think that you find the adventure in your life. I think this is certainly true of you. You find the adventure in your life by standing behind your words. Like, that's you, right? Those are your words. If you're telling the truth, that's actually you. And there's going to be consequences. And sometimes they're going to be negative. But do you really think that the consequences of telling the truth in your own voice are negative? You think the world's structured like that? My experience with you is that, you know, you have your opinions, your perspective, and you'll put them forward. But mostly what you do is you ask people questions that you actually have as questions, right? As far as I can tell, you're mostly trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And so that's honest. It honestly exposes your own ignorance as well. And, you know, you can take the audience along as a consequence of that. And for you, the consequence has been, you know, you've gone from just doing this podcast, sort of a side thing for you, at least when it started, to being, I don't know if there's anybody who has more impact as a single individual on the media environment worldwide than you do. And that's all a consequence of actually truthfully admitting your own ignorance and saying what you had to say. And I know you were set up to do that because you had multiple streams of income, you know, and you couldn't easily be taken out. You'd already accomplished things in a multitude of spheres. But think of the consequence of that. You think, well, would that happen to anybody who did everything they could to ask stupid questions and tell the truth? The answer is maybe. You know, so you don't do that. You hide, and you have your reasons. You know, your family's at risk. It's like, fair enough, man, but you deprive yourself of the great adventure of your life, and you contribute by remaining silent to pathologization of the whole society. So, well, that doesn't seem like a very good route to me.
You're making sense, but it's a very, very complex situation for someone who has put all their eggs in one basket, like particularly someone who's a nurse who has to work long hours, doesn't have another stream of income, and isn't really making enough money to have a nest egg saved away.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, maybe a single mother. And
right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's a woman in Canada right now, a nurse whose name, unfortunately, I forget, who's being hauled over the coals by her college for, you know, making the radical claim that there are only two sexes. How do we prioritize our attempts to establish our states and our international relationships properly so that we prioritize human well-being, you know, in harmony with nature to the degree that's possible, but human-focused and not predicated on the idea that there are too many goddamn mouths on the planet to feed and that you're evil if you just think about having children. So then on the governance front, this is where it gets kind of more left-wing, I would say, is none of the people involved in this consortium so far are very thrilled with global corporate fascist government media and corporation collusion. You know, and we're seeing this at the high end. It's like a Tower of Babel, is that the powerful players in the world are increasingly collaborating to impose a top-down vision of the future on everyone. And that's a future that's predicated on a zero-growth model. And the idea that, well, we'd need 5 planets really to support everyone at the current standard of living that obtains in the West. So the best pathway forward is to deny loans by the World Bank to developing countries so they can't develop, you know, energy sources, which all that'll mean is they're going to burn wood and coal, obviously. So that's the third question is, you know, how do we arrange systems of governance to stop the march of something like pathological gigantism? This is why I like people like Russell Brand and also you to some degree politically, you know, because you guys are very, what would you say, sensitive to the danger of that kind of corrupt collusion, that regulatory capture that occurs when corporate entities and media entities and governmental entities are all in bed together, like the FDA and the CDC and so forth and so on without end. So that's the third question. The fourth question is, what do we put forward as a vision on the family policy front to facilitate the, what would you call it, the encouragement and the maintenance of long-term monogamous couples who are child-centered, and to make increasing the birth rate part of that policy, to put policies in place that would support long-term stable monogamous families, two-parent families, and child-centered. You know, because in the West, because we're very immature, we think that the purpose of a marriage is the happiness of the people who are involved in the marriage, the husband and the wife. And that's just not the purpose of marriage at all. The purpose is long-term facilitation of their psychological and spiritual development and the establishment of an environment that's beneficial to children. That's a responsible way of thinking about it. And so we need to have a serious conversation about what that means. And, you know, it's tricky because, like, I think the ideal has to be long-term committed monogamous heterosexual relationships. And so part of the model that we're trying to put forward in this group that I'm describing is based on this principle of subsidiarity and the idea that we want to encourage everyone to take as much responsibility as possible at the most local level possible, right? So take responsibility for yourself until you're good enough at that so you can take responsibility maybe for a wife. And then if you're good enough at that, maybe you can extend that to some kids. And then maybe you can serve your local community. And then maybe you can serve your state. And maybe if you really get good at it, you could serve your nation. So the core idea is something like you get the hierarchy of social organization right, it generates unlimited wealth. And we've already seen that to a large degree. You know, we've lifted more people out of poverty in the last 15 years than really, it's unparalleled. You know, 7 out of 8 billion people now either have the minimum they need or something exceeding that. And instead of, you know, starving to death by the billions, which is what everybody who was on the Malthusian side predicted back in the 1960s. And so I've been working on this for a long time, and I've got a good group of core people who seem to be, you know, reliable and not motivated, we hope and pray, by something approaching, you know, narcissistic egotism, and everybody's sworn to try to make this as decentralized as possible on the principle that the more responsibility you can offload to people, the better everything will work. That's a fundamentally conservative principle, like a small c conservative principle, right? So you need a hierarchy of responsibility, and you offload responsibility to the local where possible.
The thing that we have in common is we're all just human. And if we're all human, there's always going to be this weirdness to existence, and trying to figure out why and what it is, and also recognizing that some of the people that have defined why are so inherently flawed, and they're very selfish in their definitions, and, you know, you have to kind of sort that out and parse through it. And one of the things that's been amazing about having a podcast is to present people with these different minds that have found their own way through it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fun, eh?
Yeah.
That's what I loved about being a clinician, too, is to see how different and crazy and strange and interesting people really are if you listen to them. It's like, you know, I had lots of clients in my practice who were they weren't people who would ever be put on a pedestal. You know, they were people who were in the dirt suffering away. But man, if you listen to them, they were so interesting that you just could hardly stand it. So that was a good thing to learn. And that you see, you know, you find gold in very unexpected places. Like, I learned a lot from some of my most damaged clients.
I would imagine. Just what's possible.
Yeah, well, and how much people could still strive towards what was good, even if they had every reason to be. You know, I had clients whose lives were so terrible, you'd think no matter what they did, you'd think, yeah, well, it's no wonder you did that, because look what you went through.
Right.
But they didn't turn out to be,
our prisons are
serial
filled with
sexual
people.
slayers.
Our prisons are filled with people like that, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Jordan, we just did another 3 hours. It flew by in 10 minutes.
Yep. Good to see you, Joe.
It's great to see you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you very much,
man.
Oh,
it's
listen,
always a pleasure to come
the
see
moment that was happening, I had to reach out to you because I'm like, this is just so bizarre and crazy, and it
like
needs
I said,
to be
it was
discussed.
your fault.
Yeah, it's my fault, so I had to have you on.
Yeah.
All right, let's go get something to eat.
All right, man.
So when this does launch and when it's official, and when we could talk about it further, we will. Okay?
Yep.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you, my friend.
You bet.
Appreciate you.
Good to see you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.